Okay, we have a quorum. If anybody leaves the table, we break quorum. This meeting is called to order. It is 9:03. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mel?
Item number 1 is discussion action to approve the motions and minutes for the August 17, 2018 Transportation Policy Board meeting. Oh, before that, sorry, there is no general public comment.
There's nobody signed up to speak?
For item number 2.
Okay.
But yes, nothing for general.
Item number 1, the approval of the motions for the minutes for the August 17. Okay, there's a motion.
Second.
Motion and a second for the approval of the minutes. Those in favor, vote by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Item number 2.
Item number 2 is to approve a discussion action to approve a resolution by the Transportation Policy Board expressing its support for the Borderland Expressway project, aka Northeast Parkway, and it's further supportive of efforts to secure funding from the Texas Department of Transportation and any other potential funding sources that would assist in the development of such project. And I will defer that to Mr. Raymond Thayes from the Camino Real Regional Mobility Authority.
Thank you. Great, thanks. Good morning. Raymond Thayes, Executive Director of the Camino Real Regional Mobility Authority, and I was asked to present to this board a little bit of background on the Inner Loop project. The reason for that is that there's a potential funding possibility for the Northeast Parkway, which mirrors the Inner Loop project. So what I thought I'd do is share with you a couple of slides, and what we're going to talk about are really two distinct projects, but there's a little bit of confusion in terms of what the project really consists of. So you're probably familiar with the Northeast Parkway. That is one component of what's been referred to now as the Borderland Expressway project. So if you look at the screen, and this is included in your backup, there's a map that shows the route of the Borderland Expressway project. Really, the Borderland Expressway project consists of two distinct projects. It's the Northeast Parkway, which are improvements that are on the Texas side. And then at that point, once it hits New Mexico, it connects at New Mexico 213 and runs on to New Mexico 404 and eventually connects back up to I-10. So really what we're talking about is a roadway that would connect Loop 375 in the Northeast up to I-10 in New Mexico. So those are the two distinct components, right? So you've got the New Mexico 404 and New Mexico 213, as well as the Northeast Parkway project. Collectively, they are the Borderland Expressway project. And I would mention, too, these projects are being pursued, Northeast Parkway currently being pursued by TxDOT, the New Mexico components, obviously, by New Mexico DOT. So if you have specific technical questions about the projects, I'll defer to those entities. I'm really here to explain how the Inner Loop works. Here's another graphic to show you in a little more detail what the proposed roadway looks like. So here's the project status. So the MPO has included the Texas and New Mexico elements of the Borderland Expressway into the Destino plan. TxDOT is managing the development of the Northeast Parkway currently, with environmental approval anticipated for 2019. New Mexico DOT is looking at sections of improvements along sections of New Mexico 404. And the RMA's involvement to date has been, the board has directed staff to serve as the lead on the development of a memorandum of understanding, which is intended to really bring all of the potential stakeholders together to talk about the different roles of the parties as we move this project forward. The Northeast Parkway's current cost estimate for a Super 2 configuration from TxDOT is $284 million. And TxDOT has engaged HNTB to develop a grant application for the Federal Infra Grant Program for possible project funding. I would mention, too, there's a representative here from HNTB that can share with you details on that process, if you're interested. So this is really why I'm here, this final bullet point. Another possible project funding source could be pass-through financing. So this is what the region used back in 2008 for the development of the State Spur 601 Inner Loop project. So that's really what I want to outline. This was the project as it was envisioned. I'm sure you all have used this one. It's known locally also as the Liberty Expressway. It was renamed several years back. This was an important project for the region. It was brought forth, in fact, expedited in order to assist with the base realignment and closure activities that were occurring at the time. The project itself actually connected Loop 375 on the far east side over to US 54 on the west end of the project. Huge project for Fort Bliss and, of course, the region. So this was an important project for everyone. The project itself originally came about as an unsolicited bid by a developer to TxDOT, and in fact actually was executed. There was an agreement between the parties that had the developer issuing private debt, and it was paying back, and then ultimately constructing it as a design build project, and then TxDOT over a period of time was repaying that debt based on a pass-through finance structure. What that really means is they were going to count vehicles, and each time a vehicle used the roadway for a certain stretch of roadway each mile, the developer would receive a certain amount. Well, as I'm sure you know, private debt is more expensive than public debt. The RMA was created in the interim while they were negotiating this deal, and the RMA was added through an amendment to that agreement, and the RMA served as really the conduit bond issuer. So in the end, what we did is we issued $233 million in debt, less expensive, and TxDOT began paying the RMA back so we could service that debt. The way that it worked then was that each vehicle, and this is still going on today, each vehicle that uses that roadway that's under 20 feet long, the RMA receives 25 cents from TxDOT for each mile. Each vehicle over 20 feet, we receive 85 cents. Beyond that, though, we also have a minimum and a maximum built into that agreement. So our, say for example, the use of those vehicles, or the counting of those vehicles, generates $10 million in a 6-month period. We have a minimum built in, which is $15.6 million that is required to be paid by TxDOT to us each 6 months. So even if the actual counts result in $10 million, we receive $15.6 million. Through that structure, then we will be able to pay out that $233 million in bonds in 11 years, which is really expedited. So it's a really innovative way of doing a financing. It keeps the debt on the RMA's books as opposed to TxDOT's books, and in this particular case, resulted in an award from the bond buyer. So it was recognized as an innovative funding source. And that's really it. I think what we're really talking about here, and I'll defer to Representative Pickett, but what we're really talking about here is that in 2021, in January of 2021, TxDOT will make its final payment to the RMA for the Inner Loop project. So the concept here would be, if those payments continue to the RMA, we would be able to use that assignment of revenues to go out and issue another bond, and we could use those bond proceeds for the development of the Northeast Parkway.
Add a few things. I'd asked Raymond to make a presentation because of the timing on this. This project is not in our short-term plan, so it's not planned, and we don't have the money over the next 4 years. It's in our long-term plan, our MTP. This is also not in TxDOT's 10-year plan, the UTP. So TxDOT is not looking at any funding for this for a minimum of 10 years because it's not in their plan. Based on the fact that the debt is coming due relatively soon, January of 2021, I thought this might be an opportunity to go to the commission and have them look at a possibility of getting this put into the 10-year plan based on what we did originally on Spur 601. And that unsolicited proposal was really a godsend at the time. And it's exactly that. It was just people looking at the plans of a region and picking one themselves. We, the MPO, didn't pick it. The city of El Paso didn't. We all came in and supported it, but it was somebody from the outside that said, I think we could do this. I think we can go out and borrow the money. We'll issue the bonds. And as Raymond said, even at that time at a higher rate, it was still something feasible that the commission was interested in. We wound up being the first one in the state of Texas to actually do anything like this. So the timing of this is because of the $284 million price tag. If we don't come up with some type of alternative type financing, I see that 10 years being 11, being 12, being 13. This is a project that's going to be difficult, I think, for TxDOT to come up with $284 million just to fund outright. In a letter that I sent to the board members, in simple terms, and Raymond can correct me, the state of Texas is not allowed to just pay our debt. We can't issue bonds and the state of Texas pay the debt. That's why it's proposed as what's called this pass-through. We get the Texas Department of Transportation to agree that this is going to improve congestion, that there's going to be amount of vehicles use it, and come up with a formula that really is separate from the bonding. The bonding is one thing, and then we're just turning around and asking the commission, would you give us an amount of money each year based on how many vehicles use this roadway that we improved? It's a way for the commission, I believe, and that's going to be the pitch to them, that they can show leverage without it being a tolled project. They can show it being leveraged without the state issuing bonds. They can show this as another $284 million project adding to the state system, and them coming up with an biannual amount that would be sufficient for us to pay the debt. I wouldn't suggest this if we weren't about to come due on the other bonds. There's also some other improvements that Dr. Noe and I have talked about, and maybe we could get Eddie Valtier. Mr. Bielik is at a conference this morning, but the timing on this could be good with all the other improvements that are being planned for that section of Purple Heart from Montana going out to Northeast, the expansion of Montana from Global Reach to 375. So it's good timing because those projects are funded and are going forward, and this has multiple aspects. This should not be looked at as what we originally planned years and years ago of just being a bypass. With the fact that Border Highway West is coming online pretty soon, that is going to be our reliever for the most part for Interstate 10. We still have issues of safety, emergency, but this project would develop a lot of Northeast. This project has some important aspects to Fort Bliss for connectivity. So it's not really even looked at as a bypass, because Dr. Noe and I talked about that, how 375 has been so successful. There's a lot of congestion on 375 now north of Montana. But with the improvements that are coming online, I think, again, this is perfect timing. There's no guarantees. All I know is this plan, this project is not funded right now, and I'm just proposing that we take this to the commission to see what they think about this idea of doing it this way instead of asking for $284 million all at once, which I think most of us know what the answer to that would be.
Senator. Give it a
I wasn't sure. I've got some questions about it. Has this project actually been vetted, and is it priority for our district?
So
Well, I can answer that. This
Sure.
was a major
Yeah.
priority for years and years here. And yes, it's been vetted. It's in our long-term plan. It kept getting pushed out because of the dollar amount. There was a time that the state of New Mexico was not as excited about it as I believe New Mexico has a little bit more of an interest in it now than they did in the past. And even back when we had our floods, you know, they closed Interstate 10 back in Deming, New Mexico, because we couldn't get through our community. But yes, it's been vetted. It was a high priority project before, but I'm glad you brought that up because I've made that comment here several times. We currently don't have a list of our regional priorities. This is one that I would hope that the board sees as a top 5 for the region, and hopefully in the future we can take some action on the priorities that are not funded. We have projects that are funded. This one is not. This is not
Okay,
funded.
but who can answer for me, is it priority for this district? Because I know I've sat here and I've listened to different projects, different things that people want. Is this, who decides, is it priority for our district?
So this entity answers that question.
Well, but I
Okay.
think- but where does it, I guess?
So we don't, this has not been set as priority for our district, because according to what Representative Pickett just said, it's been something that's been discussed, and who actually has vetted it? I mean, I see it, sometimes I see things on the agenda, and this is not, I mean, I want to know when it's been vetted, how it's been vetted, and if
That's
this is
today.
priority.
Today.
It's being vetted today.
Today is one of the processes of asking whether this body believes it's important or not.
Okay, so it has not been vetted.
Well,
Yes,
Roger Williams, I'll pass
it's,
it on.
yeah.
I would like to, this project was submitted to us in the last call for projects for the Destino 2045 MTP by the district as a high priority. This project has gone through the process of developing the travel demand model, and Representative Pickett is correct that we don't have per se a rank of projects from 1 to 150, for example. That is still to come. Although when we have looked at this project and modeled it along with all the other priorities within the MTP, it becomes very clear that I-10, US 54, and Loop 375 will benefit from the Destino 2045 MTP. That's to include the Northeast Parkway. We can see the congestion reduction as we move forward. This project is in FY 2029 currently of our plan. So it's just outside the UTP, if you will. Okay, so we have it funded, but we don't have an identified funding for it, but it has been recognized as a priority for the region.
How much is it going to cost?
Well, right now, we're talking about $284 million for our Super 2. But if you go and look at what the cost for a full-blown 4-lane facility out there, it's probably a couple of $100,000 million more than that number right there. But what makes this project also work is the fact that on the New Mexico side, 404 is also going to be widened to a 4-lane facility, and the bridge at I-10 and 404 is going to be rebuilt, if you will. And then the other connection that makes it important is on the New Mexico side is the 213, New Mexico 213 project. It will connect with this project at the state line. So therefore then with the way our model works is when you look at all those components and put it together, you can definitely, especially as it relates to freight, see a great benefit.
I'm a little confused. Why is it not in the UTP? And maybe TxDOT can answer this.
Good morning, Eddie Maltier, TxDOT. So the reason why it's not in the UTP is we get allocations for 10 years with different categories. Of course, those are capped. And so what we have to do is get our list of projects as we go on. If we were to place this project in the UTP, we wouldn't be able to work on many other projects, so we'd be working on one single project. So projects like this, what we do is we try to develop them to a certain stage, the larger projects, and what we try to do is go for these extra, these funds that could be available in the future, so we're always ready. This one in particular is unique because it has two states that can work together. That's why you see the possible application for a grant. It is an important project. We can't put it in the NTP because then we can't work on anything else. But we do have the project developed to a really good level right now. We have it in the schematic level. Environmental could be wrapped up hopefully in middle of 2019. So it's there. We just can't go forward until we find a funding source, and that's where we look for some of the creativity.
And the modeling demonstrates the traffic counts justify.
So yeah, so the modeling will be, it's been modeled. It does help I-10 with through traffic, because what we have to look at is, you have an accident downtown as we've seen. So we have the internal traffic in the city, right? So nobody's going to go out there to take that bypass. However, we have a lot of through traffic coming from California to Houston. So that's where that becomes a positive there.
So if most of the congestion is city traffic, how much does this alleviate the actual problem?
So that's
based on TxDOT's traffic counts.
Yeah, and so the traffic counts are a little bit older, but what I want to say is probably on a regular day, this is just, without an accident, without congestion, probably 40,000, 50,000 vehicles.
Mm-hmm.
So, but if you take into account, let's say an accident, I-10 is shut down, and let's say we work with our partners in New Mexico and create a system where there's notification early on in New Mexico. Here's what happens if you go through downtown. Here's what happens if you take this route.
Mm-hmm.
We're in the process of doing what type of time savings and what does that economically do to the area. So it wouldn't be such a, I'm not going to say it's like this loaded, with traffic corridor, but sometimes that's not what it's all about. Sometimes it's about making connections and mobility.
How old is the data from the modeling?
Oh, I think we updated it? Okay. So we're probably talking about 2 years ago.
2 years ago?
Yeah.
And then there was mentioned about the New Mexico side. There is, if TxDOT goes for this grant, we get it, New Mexico will cover its end of the, in other words, if we're building the road on this side, are we going to have the funds from New Mexico to finish the project?
So, Mr. Chair, just to clarify what New Mexico is doing, so although we agree that this needs to happen, we're approaching it a little bit differently because New Mexico 404 specifically for us is accident prone and fatality prone. So we sought safety funding. We actually have the New Mexico 404 I-10 interchange scheduled for 2021. That is a funded project. We're in the process of designing it right now. As part of that same design, we are designing the Super 2 through 404 and 213. We're acquiring the right-of-way through BLM to accommodate a full build-out. The 2-lane section is currently scheduled in our planning stip for 2023, but we're prepared to move forward with the 4-lane section when the time comes. But at this point, the only 2 projects we have funded are the Super 2 and the interchange itself. So yes, we're moving forward. I will tell you that we have a coalition meeting this afternoon after lunch. I've talked to the secretary, and if a grant is sought, we are committed to providing the New Mexico match on our side.
Right. And then the question, and maybe Raymond can answer this, but when does the grant open and when does it close? And a follow-up question to Roger, are there any other projects within our plan that also qualify for this funding?
So there's 2 questions. The grant, specifically, HNTB can help with that. So there is the infra grant that TxDOT is looking at. The outside funding source that I'm talking about, those funds wouldn't be available until early 2021, because that's when the payments from TxDOT would end to the RMA for the interloop deal. So the grant project, we'll ask HNTB to talk about that.
Good morning. Eduardo Caleb with HNTV. As Raymond and Eddie mentioned, we are helping TxDOT to prepare an application for the infra grant program. That's the former fast lanes. These are federal programs that are very competitive nationwide. But we thought that this was a great opportunity for this project because of the nature of the project. I mean, it's a high cost, but having what is really important and really cool about this opportunity is that TxDOT has been developing the Texas side, the Northeast Parkway, and they have, there is schedule. New Mexico has been looking at improvements on 404, but the idea is to look at this as a whole project, and that's why the coalition renamed it the Borderland Expressway. So now it's a whole project without necessarily looking at divisions between the states, right? So now the plan is to request funding to build the whole thing, the ultimate, the 4-lane from Loop 375 in Texas through the state line, improve to 213 and 404 in New Mexico, and reconnect it. So again, what we're preparing is an application for a federal funding program.
So there's no expiration window by the time we need to get this application?
Well, for this specific program, it's under the FAST Act, and it's a 5-year plan. The applications for fiscal year 19 have not been open. In other words, the notice has not come out. We were assuming that it would follow the same schedule as fiscal year 18, which was July to November. But what we're hearing is that the notice will come out in early January.
Okay.
So, well, early 2019. So all of the work that goes into preparing this, which is, putting a funding plan together, and more importantly on this one, there are so many different, moving parts and stakeholders, which makes it very, very interesting and more attractive for the program.
Mm-hmm.
The reason why the RMA is involved, because they can, work both on the Texas and New Mexico side, put the two efforts together as a single project.
So it's not imminent. I mean, it's not something that we have to hurry up and do this now.
Well, I mean, as far as.
I mean, is there like an
urgency-
expiration date like a deadline?
Well, for the infra program, once a notice comes out, typically they give about 4 months
Got it.
to submit the application. So if it comes out in January, we're looking at the deadline to be May, May, June.
Okay. And then just my final question, Roger, are there any other projects in our plan that would qualify for this grant?
They would, but those projects that we're talking about are also TxDOT projects, most likely. We have other projects on Loop 375 and I-10, US 54. I mean, we would have to look real close to see which ones they are, but for the most part, you're still talking about on-state projects that are TxDOT submitted.
So your recommendation is to do what? Is it to, in terms of the MPO, from our priorities?
Well, all I can tell you is from what we see right now, the way the Destino model is set up, and it includes projects that you're talking about too, as well as the Northeast Parkway. And when you put those together, and you put together the fact that the Northeast Parkway would be whole, especially when it comes to a full-blown 4-lane, even to handle internal traffic, then it has good capabilities to do that. The Super 2, well, it's not as attractive as the full-blown project is. But what I'm looking at is when we go back to the Destino model, and we model projects for the region, it includes these projects that we're talking about too, that are on these other roads. I mean, to include MLK, Martin Luther King, US 54, those ones that are closer by, but also the loop in particular.
Yeah. My only concern is that, as long as I've been on the MPO, we've been focusing on intercity congestion. And that's been the bulk of our concern. My only concern about this project is that we're going to now direct funding or request funding for a project that's outside of that does in some way mitigate, although we don't have very accurate data that demonstrates that.
Well, I would defer to TxDOT to give you the specifics of their study.
Mhm.
But from what I saw in their study, there's benefits to it from the east side of town, downtown, all around the area, especially if you're looking at additional traffic generated internally.
And greater benefits than other projects.
We would have to do more work, and I don't know if TxDOT can answer that question.
So So internally, we go through a little process where we try to prioritize what our projects are. Again, and then it's also based on what the project does. You know, you're right, we do concentrate a lot on the inner city. But part of that, like I said, there's different pieces to the puzzle. So a project like this is a little bit different strategy. You know, where as a project on I-10 here locally would help the local community, that's good. But what we see is a lot of traffic coming in through, and if we can get the opportunity to divert that traffic away from the areas that the local community is using, that is a benefit. It also helps when we don't have the analysis done yet, but you know, when you talk about these large trucks coming in and you have an accident and you have idling. So another benefit
There are
is
assumptions?
air quality. Yeah, and we have all those studies to go. That's part of the environmental. So we're not quite done with that, but I mean, there are benefits to this project.
Okay.
And that's also what we noticed in our model too, is the benefit to freight. So, and this, we've been working to put this on the state freight plan in Texas, and I think New Mexico's been involved in some of those meetings as well.
Oh, okay, you're next.
We have Judge Vogt, Alderman Miller, and then Representative Fernandez. Okay.
And along that same note, and I appreciate the dialogue to provide context to this project because some of us are fairly new to the MPO and some of the work that's been going on for several years. But in terms of through traffic and local traffic, we've talked about the fact that if I-10 were to not be at capacity or working at capacity, that this could serve as an alternate route. What is that split in terms of local versus through traffic? It sounds like the through traffic would benefit more from this than local, as the representative was talking about. But I'm interested in what that looks like, if we know a percentage.
Yeah, so we'd have to look up what that split is. I mean, what we're trying to do is, we actually have a small study going on for the bridge that got hit downtown. And so we're trying to get a regional look at what happened and where people went. And then we're going to try to get, with our folks here at HNTB, to model that to see what would have gone over there on an extreme accident. So we don't have quite on the extreme accident level, but we do know that at least, and when we think it's a low number, 50,000 ADT would go that direction. So downtown gets probably 240,000, something like that. Don't quote me on that, but it's pretty close to that.
And so in terms of the funding as well, it doesn't seem like we have a clear picture quite yet, but if this funding were to be requested and provided, does it impact any other TxDOT project that we've been talking about, like I-10, specifically downtown, like the Reimagine I-10? Would this take away from projects like that have been discussed? Because I don't know.
Let me answer that. It's actually the reverse. If we were able to get the commission to look at funding this project this way, that's $284 million that we're not trying to put on the entire system. I don't know if I'm explaining correctly. Right now, again, we're just asking, in our long-term plan, we just want $284 million. And it's something that's probably not going to happen if we just ask for $284 million. If we propose funding something this way, and very few projects, first off, could be done this way. And I'm trying not to get people confused with the grant. The $284 million isn't a grant. That's not a grant out there that we're trying to get $284 million. That's a separate motion that's going on. If we could do this because of bi-state, and it's a great project, if they can do that, that's fine. If we ask TxDOT to do this, we could get funding for more projects because we found a way to do a larger one a different way. So by asking for them for this improves our chances on getting other projects funded.
All due respect,
Wait a second.
Can we hear from TxDOT on that important question? I highly respect Representative Pickett. I would just like to hear directly from TxDOT.
Sure. So we don't control what our allocations are. That's controlled from Austin, so I can't, commit to you anything. All I can say is that during SPUR 601, that was funded in this manner. The allocations continue to be the same what they were on the traditional route. So we didn't see a dip. We didn't see anything like that. We continue to put out other projects. Now, this is a decision way above my pay grade when this request goes in. So there are other folks up on top Chairman Representative Pickett is well aware of how the process works. So, I can't tell you yes or no, but I can tell you what happened in the past.
Alderman Miller?
Okay, just a couple of observations here. This project has been around a long time, and it initially was envisioned as a primarily a bypass to alleviate some of the congestion on I-10. But from what the chairman has said, this perhaps has evolved into a different project and more of an economic driver than strictly a bypass, because now with the completion of some of the more recent projects, we are going to have some of that traffic alleviation downtown. So not only would it serve as a bypass, but it could also generate some development in the Northeast. So perhaps in envisioning what it's going to do, it could be an economic driver for that area. That being said, if I'm not mistaken, and we're talking about funding cocktails, this project was once on a TRZ network from the city, and I think was included as part of a TRZ at one time.
In the zone.
And since could possibly be also viewed as an economic driver, that might be a source of funding for some sort of funding cocktail that could improve our chances for the grant. So perhaps we should not just look at this as a bypass, but also as a driver for development for an underserved part of our community. I have some concerns, as Dr. No does, about east side mobility. To the representative's point, congestion is not unique to downtown. There's some other parts of town that do have congestion, and we're seeking relief also. So anything that would help us in a rapidly expanding part of the county to get some north-south relief. We've got some pretty good east-west relief, but we don't have a whole lot of north-south. We do have some concerns about putting all that traffic on the loop, because that is our north-south connection, but those are my comments.
Yes, so we have been looking at this for a long time. So something I know that we keep moving projects, and you all keep seeing orange barrels. And so just to let you all know, the project that was mentioned earlier, the Montana project from Global Reach to Saragossa, that project, I'm not going to jinx it, we're trying to get that project let. Plans are 100%. We're going through the final stages. Looks like an October letting. And that's in anticipation of Fort Bliss selling that big plot of land next to the airport. So then, of course, we also looked at strategically, how do we, that's just one part of the puzzle. It's already level of service F, and so we're trying to improve that. When you look at Loop 375, we have a companion project that is 100% designed. We are about 95% environmental, and it is actually funded. That's to add a lane on Loop 375 from Montana to Spur 601. So we're going to add a lane to the center. We're also going to add frontage roads, anticipating that sail off to the west. So that area is now set up for this development. As you look forward even more, the segment of Loop 375 from Spur 601 all the way to Dyer is not funded. However, it is in the MTP, I believe in 2026 or something like that. But we'll check on that. But it's in a position where it can be accelerated if needed, so we get the extra lane there as well. So we would have this added lane or this added capacity going all the way from New Mexico down to Loop 375, widened, and then widened again up to Montana, and then we just widened the loop from Montana to I-10. So that's how we have done that.
Representative Ortega, and then Councilwoman Fernandez.
Well, have you had your?
No. Okay.
You haven't really had a chance.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. I think a project of this magnitude really requires a lot more thought. I think you all should come back with multiple proposals for this funding source, for you all to present one project that is in a long-term plan, I don't think is the best approach. I do believe that it could be a significant economic development driver. I don't believe it would be a great bypass. My father is a truck driver, and you will never see him actively go over a mountain in trucks. So it's not my opinion that will be a favorable route, but I'm also not an engineer, which is why I would like to see models, I'd like to see data, I'd like to see more than what was just presented today. And then are there other projects that can benefit from this? And you've said yes and no. We don't know if other projects can use that money. So bring all of that to us, please, so that we can make informed decisions. Today, I'm not ready to say, yes, this is a priority for the area, specifically when we have a freeway that's highly congested and has a lot of infrastructure needs. So I would urge the body to take some time to think this through, ask for additional information. Let's make a strategic decision and ask for more data and take our time. We have until January to come back with a better proposal, please.
I think it's great that we are having this discussion and that we're being told about this project, but I agree, and that's why I was asking, has there actually been a vetting of this process, of this project? Because I know that this district has many needs, and I would want to know, are there other projects that this policy board should be considering and then deciding, as we say, we are the deciding board as to whether or not this is the best one or there is another one that is better. So I would like to have the MPO come back and at the next meeting or soon tell us what other projects are available. Is this the best decision to go with this project or another project?
Yeah.
Representative Blanco, then Senator Rodriguez.
I don't feel comfortable making this decision without, whether or not other projects meet this requirement or meet the priority. I understand this is I agree this is a great project. I just don't know enough. And I don't know what else, if we're going to go to TTC with an ask, is this the ask that we want, right? Or are there other asks that we can make of it for funding? And I think the modeling needs to be updated. So that I'd like to make a motion to table this agenda item until we get more information.
Okay, let's hear from other members of the board.
My only comment is along the lines of what Cassandra and Lena have brought up. And, you know, it seems to me that we always have these plans, right? We work on the 10-year plan, the 40-year plan, and we all got projects that we're interested in to relieve congestion, to do this, to do that in different parts of our community. And it seems like periodically we'll have somebody come in and say, here's a project, you know, that we need to consider funding right now, because otherwise the window's going to close on us. That seems to be the message. This one is one that I'm interested in. I had been for purposes of it being a bypass to relieve the I-10 traffic congestion. And you recall a while back I asked Engineer Bielik about where were we with that Anthony Gap, as we've called it in the past, project. But I still am not clear as to what the impact would be, Chairman Pickett, of the commission approving this. This resolution calls, I guess, is so that we can convey to the commission our sentiment that this is something that we now support, even though it's not on the 10-year plan. Can you give us the $200-some million? I still am not clear as to if they decided to do that, what impact that would have on projects that are in the pipeline, like for relieving congestion, what impact that would have on the plans for the downtown, what's that plan called?
The I-10.
The I-10 plan down here. And so while I'm sympathetic to the project, and I have been from the beginning, I agree with the representative that we need more information.
Thank you. And actually, just want to highlight what Trent brought up and ask him maybe to elaborate a little bit more, because this is a project that's been discussed for quite some time, and Alderman Miller mentioned that the purpose of it is expanded quite a bit over I mean, it probably precedes, if not coincides with the time that I spent on this board. But Trent brought up a very good point, and New Mexico has previously not been in alignment with us putting this as a priority project. And it's not their fault, it's just that it didn't bear out for their side of the border. However, you highlighted this isn't just about economic drivers, this isn't just about bypass and traffic mitigation. You highlighted a very important piece of why this is critical, and that's why it's critical to New Mexico, is safety. And so I want you to, because New Mexico hasn't always been in alignment and is now moving essentially quicker than we're moving on this. So can you walk us through that timeframe and how that project has come forward from the New Mexico perspective?
Certainly, Mr. Chair. So again, from our perspective, honestly, this doesn't, our progression doesn't have anything to do with the Northeast Parkway. Granted, that tie-in needs to take place should Texas expand on their side. Ours is truly a safety and capacity issue, specifically the I-10 404 interchange. So looking at our fatality and accident history, basically from the interchange to the Doña Ana Community College, that is phase 1. That is currently funded. Phase 2 is the Super 2, and that's to address the head-ons, the lack of passing, the high speed, the glare of the sun. It is again a safety priority for us. As part of that project, just to simplify the full build-out when it comes to fruition, we're acquiring right-of-way. We're going to place the dirt work. We're going to extend the structures that would allow a 4-lane section when the time comes. That is currently in our planning step in 2023, so it's not considered a fully funded project yet, but it is in our planning step and we're moving forward with the design. The 4-lane at this point is unfunded. We don't have the capacity to build it. The commitment that I made if we move forward with the funding is if we move with the infra grant. That's the only way at this point a full build out would be funded on the New Mexico side.
And Chairman, I'm not misremembering about the alignment, right, between the two states. It seems like we were moving, maybe it was tied to Fort Bliss development, all those things at the time, but can you,
we were,
institutionally, I'm just trying to remember the discussion.
We were moving quite a bit ahead of New Mexico. In fact, we had a representative here that became the Secretary of Transportation in New Mexico for a while, Alvin Dominguez. And at that time, it was way down on their list. It's come up quite a bit. I still think there's a lot of misunderstanding. We can postpone this to next month and nothing will be different. The numbers are going to be basically the same. It's all going to be, it's positive. I'm not sure what the misunderstanding here is. The request is just support of the project. Everything is going to go forward. If there's something that I'm not aware of behind the scenes that's going on, TxDOT's still going ahead with the grant. I'm still going to propose to the Texas Transportation Commission a way to fund this because it benefits our district, it benefits Texas, and they just are running out of ideas, and this isn't taking away from anything. If you looked at all the projects that we have, could we even try to apply this type of financing on those? It wouldn't work. So we're not taking away from anything. It's something that we were the first in Texas to do. We could ask TxDOT to do it today. The problem that is that they're still paying this $30 million a year to us, and I just thought it was easier to be able to say, hey, you're going to stop paying us $30 million pretty soon, but you're used to paying us $30 million, and you've gotten in the habit of it. How about paying us $30 million in the future as soon as the debt comes due? And we can do all the planning ahead of time, and if the commission saw this as a possibility, it would become seamless. So I would not recommend or support tabling it. It's if you're going to kill it, vote to kill it, but don't vote to table it because nothing's going to change. There will be no new information next month. It's all going to be the same again. And it's not saying this is the #1 priority for the region. It's saying, hey, here's a project. Have you thought of doing it this way? That's what I'm asking TxDOT to take a look at. That's it.
concerns that I brought up have to do with the Far East Side's dependence on the loop and its access to the interstate. We don't have, like it's been mentioned before, a good north-south connection. From Montwood down is pretty much dead. We've got Rojas coming out, Pelicano coming out, but nothing really coming down from a huge population of people in the Far East Side that is totally dependent on that, and adding congestion to that concerned me. My concerns were quite a bit alleviated, though, after speaking to everyone about all the other things that's going on with expansion of an additional lane, with the improvements to Montana being done before this comes online. I think that would help quite a bit, but I still think the city needs to get with TxDOT and the other communities, Horizon City, the MPO certainly, and establish other ways of ingress and egress into the Far East Side than just one road, which is the loop. I'm going to go ahead and not support tabling it, and I'll support the project, because this has been around. It was a very important project at one point, and the only thing, my understanding back then was, the only thing holding it up was TxDOT really didn't have any interest in it. Now they do. Now we have a way of funding it that I'm told will not affect other projects. This would allow I-10 to divert traffic away from it, should there be an emergency or should there be maintenance, reconstruction. It's another option of moving traffic, but it's that moving of traffic that concerns me on that part of my district that has no other way of getting in and out of there. I just need to make sure that we have assurances before any kind of final approval that there's other ways that's going to be given to that area of town to get to work and get back home. Because right now, yes, we're going to expand it above Montana up to the spur, but below it's already been expanded, and it's pretty much at capacity at rush hour right now. If we add another 80,000 trucks a day to it, that area of town's going to be choked off. So the city's going to need to work on other ways of getting people in and out of that area of my district, the Far East Side, before something like this would work, or would be, in my opinion, catastrophic to that area. But I've been working on other ways of doing that. We've got a Far East master plan going on right now because of that problem. Even without this, there's a problem out there. So I'm willing to support it, because I think that we will work out those issues, and I think it will be a benefit to alleviating traffic on I-10. Certainly in an emergency situation, it gives us an alternative too. It's an economic driver. It'll benefit, I think, if it's done right, we just need to work on a little bit, the entire east side of the county out there.
Representative Schwartzman?
Thank you. So thank you again for the presentation, Mr. Tejas. If I recall, I remember visiting then City Representative Steve Ortega back in 2010, 2011, and there was a large map that had this as one of the identified plans from a 2008 master plan from the MPO. I think that some of the issues that some of the folks are having here on this board right now is that there isn't necessarily a lot of historical context to this project. I mean, I know that this is something that has been discussed at least since 2008 as being part of a master plan, and if you look at it in terms of the entire region, I mean, what you're essentially looking at is creating another Trans Mountain, right? And I think everybody here can agree that Trans Mountain is pretty difficult for a lot of 18-wheelers and freight to really travel. I don't think as many cars, 18-wheelers travel through Trans Mountain as was envisioned. It's pretty steep in a lot of places, and if anybody that's driven the Anthony Gap, it's a relatively flat pass-through in comparison to Trans Mountain. And so I'm just kind of curious, in terms of data, is there data that shows the amount of freight traffic that goes through Trans Mountain? I mean, because you're looking at this ideally being, outside of being an economic driver, it would really be a bypass that a lot of that 18-wheeler, a lot of those larger trucks that would pass through I-10 through downtown or through Trans Mountain would be looking at using this?
So I don't think I can get you that data right off the top of my head, but when I-10 is operating, they're going to choose to go to I-10. The grades on Trans Mountain are too steep, approaching 8%. Now, when there is an accident, we do see the backup with vehicles and with 18-wheelers on Trans Mountain. So, I mean, we could get you those numbers in both situations. But yes, this would be much flat. This wouldn't have any grade at all. It would be in a flat area for this project.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really important to understand that the Anthony Gap in this bypass is really something very different than what Trans Mountain is. And the ability to, again, with the concerns that were brought up by Representative No, I think that there's validity in looking at trying to get that freight traffic, those 18-wheelers outside of our congested I-10, which is only increasing in congestion, which is mostly city traffic. My other question is, and this is probably to Representative Pickett, this grant that you're looking to apply, can you talk a little bit more about that and how it's different than others? Okay.
HNTB talk about, because these are two separate tracks. And in fact, I was asked what the dollar amounts are. They're going forward regardless with asking for the grant. In my opinion, and if Eduardo Calvo will come up here, we can ask him whether or not us seeking alternative funding helps or hurts with that grant. If the grant's successful, my understanding is that it would be a bigger project than what's being proposed. And maybe we can ask Eduardo those questions. What is the grant amount that you're seeking?
Right. So the plan is to ask for the amount that would build the 4-lane, the ultimate, both in Texas and New Mexico. We're talking about $330 million. So like Chairman Pickett said, you're absolutely right. The proposal here to get the 280, that's considered state funds, right? I mean, that would be like a non-federal contribution. The grant that we're preparing is for a federal program that also would be like additional money. So if the $280 million are awarded to the project, that's considered a non-federal portion, and that increases the chances of this project being successful in this federal program to get the additional $50-some million that we would need to build the entire thing. So these are separate, but it would be very, very helpful to the federal proposal to get more non-federal money to support the project. Shows a lot more skin in the game.
When are they due, those proposals?
Well, again, for the infra program, we're expecting the notice to come out in January, and the applications would be due sometime in May, June, in that time frame. The notice hasn't come out yet, but it has to come out in that time frame because, you know, by law, by the FAST Act, they need to have a call for projects in fiscal year 19.
Any other questions or comments? One question for TechSat. Are you considering pass-through financing for the Reimagine I-10 project?
On that project, we have not considered yet. It's in our matrix right now, so I'm not going to say we haven't considered it yet. But it's a little bit different situation. The pass-through financing would probably be a little more difficult on that. I think on this, the long stretches like Spur 601 and like this, where I-10 is going to have to be broken into several chunks because of we're not talking any more 200 million. We're talking for, you know, all the improvements, billions. So, you know, it is in our mix in there, but it doesn't look like it's going to be one of the alternatives that comes out. On that one, what we like to do, and just, you know, for us is try to you know, ask the state for, they have some corridor funds that go out to, you know, that are a different big bucket of money than what we receive. Now, that's not my decision again, but if we are ready and have a good concept on those big projects, then we go to Austin, we say we're ready and we need some of those type of funds. So.
Other questions or comments?
So if this were to be postponed for a month to the next MPO meeting, and you're able to provide more historical context about this project as it relates towards when it's been on there before, does that affect the grant? Is there I think there's public comment. Well, so it wouldn't
After the board
affect,
members.
it wouldn't affect the grant application?
Yeah, so I mean, we'll do whatever you all ask, and whatever the board decides, we'll come back and we can, I'm sure, get a presentation going. It will be a lot of what I stated and what Mr. Conwell stated, with the presentation.
I don't have any more comments. What I was going to do was second Representative Blanco's motion to table because I think it's important to have more information based on all of the comments that are being made here this morning, as well as, again, asking that we, in order to properly vet a project, we have to see what else potentially could be there that we ought to be supporting. I certainly believe strongly in economic development, and I think that we need to not only look at one project, we need to look at other potential projects that are ready, because this is a lot of money that we're seeking, and I want to seek the money, but I want to make sure that this is the best project.
Can we tie in funding for the White family to this as well as part of it?
Yeah, that should be priority.
I hear from several members maintain the road, by the way.
That, I wonder if this is something that the Project Advisory Committee can look at or further provide. And ultimately, it's the TPB's decision to enact policy, and if a recommendation is made, ultimately, it's the board members who are here to decide how to move forward. But is this something that the TPAC could possibly look at? And I don't know if that's something that the TPB members would be interested in having. Perhaps we in the past, we have referred, sort of project selection processes to the Project Advisory Committee. Is that an option for that?
I would recommend that the TPAC, but the MPO in partnership with the district look at this and bring it back to you. One of the things that the MPO is working at developing is a ranking. I can't tell you for sure that we'd be able to come back with a ranking of all the MTP projects within 1 month because it's a very data-driven process. But I think what I'm seeing from TxDOT is that they've already done a study on this that's only, it's less than a year old right now. And some of the things that, I want to make sure that we understand that I mentioned here so that they don't get mixed up, and that's why I want a partnership up, is that I'm giving you information from what we see from a regional perspective, which includes the Northeast Parkway. On the other hand, TxDOT has done a study that focuses on the Northeast Parkway. Now, there are things that we can do with our modeling that can give us some information, but bringing that back to the TPAC and discussing that along with a partnership with TxDOT and bring this information back to you, I would recommend would be a good approach to get that, get something back to you by next meeting.
So you think this information could be had by the next meeting?
Not a ranking per se, and I can't guarantee you that we'd be able to come back and answer all of your questions, and I think, we've already stated that a lot of the things that we're going to find are what we've already mentioned. But I have not gotten into great detail with the study that TxDOT did. They have made some assumptions, and some of the things that I've mentioned here today are coming from assumptions that TxDOT has made in that study that are not the same as the regional model that we've developed here for the MPO. So I think it's important that we make sure that we get on the same page and that we can come back and give you something. Now whether we can do that by the next meeting, I don't know, but I can guarantee you that for us to start working towards that would be a good effort. And again, I think we've heard, that we may not come back with a whole lot more to tell you, but until I can really get with the district and we start talking about these things and start looking at what we've got, maybe we might be able to bring something back if TxDOT's okay with that.
I would like something to be brought back. It doesn't have to be by next month. I mean, the process doesn't, officially start until January.
I appreciate
So we
that.
still have several months
I
before
think
the
that
end of
would,
the
you know,
year.
because this is a task that I think is more than just back to the next
This is
meeting.
amazing. This is going to go down as a first. This board doesn't want to ask for money. I don't know what's going on. This has nothing to do with the project. I don't know what's going on with this.
Chairman, I think-
This has nothing to do with the project. I just moved to delete it indefinitely. Forget it.
There's already a motion
No.
on the floor, but I
Motion
think-
to
I think-
table. Second the motion. Let's vote and go on. This is ridiculous.
I-
This is absolutely asinine.
Chairman, I think.
Let's
many
vote.
of the
Move
members
to call
are-
the question.
I think the members are expressing concerns where they're not necessarily opposed to the project. I think they're asking
I know they're not
questions
opposed
about
to the project.
they're-
It's not the
they're
project.
just- Well, I think they're just seeking additional information
No,
to make
there's
an
something
informed
else. It's
decision.
not the project.
And so,
There's a motion on the table to.
all right, there's a
Call
motion.
the question.
Was there any other questions? No. Okay, there's a, was there, what's the length of time to postpone, and how much time would be?
Just delete it. Move to change it to delete.
Is 2 months sufficient time?
I don't know if in 2 months, do you think that we would be, I know that there's things that we could do here,
2019.
but
We're progressing, so I mean, we're going to continue working on the project, but I mean, to get.
in a
to
couple
get
of months,
everybody
we
else.
should be able to come back. We'd have
Okay.
enough time in 2 months.
And then, Mr. Rooney wanted to make,
Do you want to call public comment now or after you vote on the item?
I think Representative, did you have to plan catch? Okay. All right, well, we're going to hear, if the members are okay, we'll
Just a
entertain
moment,
public
I'm
comment.
gonna call it, okay?
Mr. Rooney.
Yes, Mike Rooney, I'm going to give you some background, and I'm going to ask you to, Mayella, to suspend the 3-minute rule. This go.
Actually, Mr. Rooney, you need to request that.
Okay, since nobody could give you the background, would you please consider suspending the 3-minute rule? This project goes back right after the turn of the century. I'm trying to use my old man's recall. It may be a little flaky. I think it was somewhere around 2003. Governor Perry became governor. Williamson became the chairman of the Transportation Commission. Texas had no transportation money. They wanted to issue bonds. And as a result, what they were doing, they were using carrots. If you'll toll, we'll give you money for projects. They offered El Paso about $82 million if we would toll. The MPO, I believe, and TxDOT had about 5 or 6 meetings, which culminated in a big meeting in the Isleta boardroom. It was so well attended, I had to stand wedged up against the back wall. There were 2 ladies showed up with one of these big black Glad garbage bags with 7,000 individual signatures against tolls. The mood of the MPO was not only no, but hell no, and they were reflecting the will of the community. Ted Houghton and Senator Shapley suggested tolling from the New Mexico border to Tornillo. No. Another suggestion was Loop 375. No. And so because of the mood, I got up when my time finally came and I said, because El Paso has raised so much hell with the state, with the courts of inquiry and the Senate Finance Committee, it certainly didn't seem very prudent to not at least submit a project. And I suggested, why don't you do the Northeast Tollway, Expressway? And the reason is the public could see that there wouldn't be tolls on the interior. Everybody liked the compromise. If you go back to the El Paso Times articles, which I provided to the MPO and Representative Pickett, that was the compromise. As time passed, I think it was about another year or 2, we got to the point where we did the $1.2 billion comprehensive mobility plan. Through compromises with TxDOT, all of you, that money eventually, our share of that carrot pot that they were offering us grew from about $82 million up to, I think, $133 million. Just because we submitted a project. Over time, as you got to the $1.2 billion comprehensive mobility project, project.
Mr. Rooney, that's
because-
3 minutes. If you could wrap up your comments.
Well, give me a little bit of time. Nobody else could do this.
The item's going to come back for if the motion passes, then
Okay,
there'll be other opportunities.
but that money was moved to other projects so you could get to where we are today. I came back later through a Texas Open Records request to the MPO. Did we get our full $133 million? And Representative Pickett, I wanted an itemized amount of where it went to. Representative Pickett came back and assured me that we got our share and kind of asked me not to push it. So if you go back in the records, you'll find that that was our #1 project. Now, did El Paso do a sleight of hand? Did we take that money, saying that was our project, move it on to other projects? So I asked Representative Pickett, I'm sure other people, should that project eventually come back for a decision? I could see over time that a freeway, because we had so many other needs that it wouldn't be practical. It would divert too much money. That's why the Super 2 came up, unless it could do the same thing. So that's how the project came up today. So did y'all, even though many of you weren't here then, do a sleight of hand, and where some contrary guy like me could go and petition for a court of inquiry and say these people aren't honest? It's part of the project. It seems like additional opportunities have come up, kind of like the border highway, the Cesar Chavez. We have to deal with funding opportunities as they come up. That's the background.
Thank
Can
you, Mr.
I
Rooney.
sit down now,
Thank you.
please?
Thank you.
It's a good
Okay.
project.
There's a motion. Yes, Mela?
Sorry, there is another public
Other
comment
than-
on the item.
Okay.
So that would be Mr. Scott White.
Good morning, Board. Scott White with El Paso Bicycle Pedestrian Coalition. One of the things it has here in this resolution that you're considering is it says the Transportation Policy Board for El Paso MPO believes the funding of the Borderland Expressway project will promote safe, effective, and efficient regional transportation projects that will serve the transportation needs of El Paso, the El Paso MPO study area. What I don't see in any of this background is what those needs are. And I think that's what I'm hearing what some of the concerns are this morning. How are we addressing the real needs? I've heard references to bypasses, I've heard references to economic development. What are we really doing to help El Paso, help this region, help the communities that surround El Paso? Is this project really going to do that? And that's the question I think really needs to be asked when we look at a major regional project like this. How are we really helping? We already know that 404 and 213 are regularly used by people who ride bicycles for recreation. Is this going to take away that opportunity for them to ride safely in these areas? Or are we going to provide them with a safe alternative route? That's part of the transportation map that we need to be looking at, not simply how many cars and trucks we can move, but all the people. How many people are we effectively moving? And if we're going to look at economic development, is that simply meaning there's going to be a lot of new growth in the Northeast, but it's going to take away development from other areas in this region? Because we're simply just making it easier to develop that area versus encouraging stronger development in other areas. The city of El Paso wants to encourage development in downtown. If we take those vehicles out of that downtown corridor, does that take away from that economic potential there? These are all questions we should be looking at. What is the bigger need here? Because transportation policy does shape land use policy, shapes economic policy. It shapes this region. And if we just assume moving cars is the only question we should be asking here, then we've missed the bigger picture of what transportation policy really does. I hope you look at all of these questions and all these issues. How can we serve this region best? Thank you.
Okay. With that, there's a motion on the floor to table. So is there any desire to include, to send this, to have the TPAC review this? Want to include that?
Yeah, I'd like to include that.
And then, if I heard correctly, 60 days or 2 months from now, was that sufficient time to have a review?
I'd have to ask TxDOT too if they think that that's enough time. Given that we have time, TxDOT can chime in on that, but Eddie.
No, we're going to continue with our project.
Yeah, but I mean, to come back to this board.
That's fine. Yeah, whatever will work out the time frame with you, so that's fine.
Okay. So there's a motion to table this item for at least 60 days, and then also have TPAC review this during that time frame. Is that?
Yes.
Second, Representative Ortega. Okay. All in favor of that motion, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed?
Can I please have a show of hands of who's voting against it?
No.
You're saying nay to that motion. With that, the motion passes. Item number 2. Item number 3, I'm sorry. We have the approving the memorandum of understanding among the El Paso MPO, TxDOT, and the Mass Transit Department of the City of El Paso.
Roger Williams again with the El Paso MPO. This MOU is an MOU that needs to be in place and FAST Act compliant by October the 1st, the new fiscal year.
60 days.
Continue, please.
I'm serious.
Continue.
I mean, October 1st.
Can you call order?
Just go.
Look, if I could give a little background on this. This is something that we've been working with Sun Metro. We've been working with TxDOT, and the MPOs in Texas have already got their MOUs in place as it relates to how the region needs to move forward in developing FAST Act compliance, and in particular, this MOU, and it'll tie into the item number 5 down below, is that it is something that we've been working on for at least 6 months, maybe longer now, and this has gone before the Mass Transit Board September the 4th this month. The Federal Highway Administration and the Federal Transit Administration, along with Sun Metro and TxDOT and the MPO, have worked diligently on this since the last few months, actually, but since the Federal Certification Review, and we don't have an actual report yet. This is one of the items that was pointed out that it needs to be done by October 1. And the reason is because there are several components that are going on here as it relates to this. The transit asset management targets that we're setting for the El Paso MPO, and the transit asset management plan that Sun Metro is in the process of developing also needs to be done by October the 1st, the new fiscal year. And I know that Sun Metro has a consultant on board now. They're working towards that end. And at the Federal Certification Review, we expressed to our federal partners how we would move forward in developing the MOU. So this is a template that has been provided to us by TxDOT TPMP. Every other MPO in the state has already come on board with this. We're, as far as I know, the last. And our efforts to move this forward are important so that we can demonstrate that we are able to be FAST Act compliant within the time frame. And what it means is if we cannot demonstrate these things that I'm talking about here, one, this MOU, the TAM plan, transit asset management plan that Sun Metro is working on. And also important, and it'll come up here again, as I mentioned on item 5, that we're able to demonstrate a process within our planning documents. If we're not able to meet the October 1 deadline, it jeopardizes the future amendments of our transportation improvement program, not only for transit, but for highway and any other type of project. So that's where we're at.
I'm just upset. We had the review team here. One of the review team members was from Federal Transit Administration, and I had asked her about that and talked to her about that, and this is extremely important, so I apologize for my first statement. I move to approve, and Jay needs this.
Are you done, Roger? Do you have more comments on that?
No, that pretty much sums it up. Yep.
Any other comment before we take a vote? The motion on the floor to approve, second by Representative Gonzalez. All those in favor of this
Aye.
item, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Next item.
Item number 4 is discussion action to approve the memorandum of agreement between New Mexico Department of Transportation, Transit and Rail Division and the El Paso MPO.
Again, Roger Williams with the El Paso MPO. This is the component, the same thing basically on the New Mexico side as we're doing on the Texas side, and it has the same conditions. It's a little bit structured a little bit differently, but it carries the same impact with it.
Okay. It's a motion to approve. Is there a second? Second by, all those in favor, please vote by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Item number 5 is discussion action to approve recommendations from the Transportation Project Advisory Committee to approve the El Paso MPO Transit Asset Management targets.
Good morning, Jose Londeros, Vice Chair of the TPAC, filling in for Chairman Greg Nickel. The recommendation before you deals with the 2 MOUs that the board just voted to approve. The federal legislation has been moving to place an emphasis on performance-based transportation planning, which measures outcomes in terms of the investments that are being made of federal and state and local dollars for transportation and public transit. Specifically, the transit asset management targets before you being recommended to be adopted are measuring 4 different things. Rolling stock, which are your service vehicles that generate revenue, equipment, which are other vehicles that don't contribute to providing service, facilities to include buildings, and infrastructure, which would include tracks. When you're thinking about light rail, the streetcar here in El Paso would contribute to that. There are 2 types of providers that are identified in the rules that the federal government has established for establishing the TAM targets. Tier 1, which are required to individually adopt their own standards. That tier includes TxDOT, NMDOT, Sun Metro, and Tier 2, which are smaller providers, which would here locally include, for example, the county transit system, which do not have to individually adopt anything, but are required to report and coordinate with the state in conjunction of establishing targets. The goal here is that the item before the board this morning is for the MPO to adopt the targets. The targets being recommended are the same targets established by TxDOT. They do differ from Sun Metro's targets. Sun Metro will be required to adopt their own targets by October 1st and are working to do that. There is no penalty for not meeting the targets at this time under the current legislation. The idea here is just to ensure that there is more reporting being done in terms of transit planning and transit investments at the regional MPO planning area. So the recommendation before you from TPAC that was voted on is to adopt the TAM target standards that mirror the standards that have been adopted by TxDOT. And that was approved unanimously by TPAC a couple of weeks ago. With that, I'll take any questions.
Any questions from TPB members?
No penalties. Jay can still have a Monster Energy drink every day. Move to approve.
Motion and a second to approve the item. All those in favor, vote by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Next item.
Thank you.
Item number 6 is a report of the executive director, and I'll list them in order. Item A is this Destino 2045 Metropolitan Transportation Plan, the 2019-2022 Transportation Improvement Program, and Transportation Conformity Report. Item B will be on the project calls. Number 1 is the New Mexico Transportation Alternative Program. Number 2 is the New Mexico Congestion Mitigation and Air Quality Non-Mandatory. And number 3 is the Federal Transit Administration 5310 Enhanced Mobility for Seniors and Individuals with Disabilities. Item C is the Doña Ana County Non-Attainment Under 2015 Ozone Standard. Item D will be Congestion Management Process and October TPB training provided by Texas A&M Transportation Institute. And item D will be discussing training and absences of members for all MPO committees.
Okay, I'll move through this as quickly as possible, but please ask questions as I go through it, if you have any. I'll be doing everything here except for the last item, item E, and then Mayela will cover that. And I'm trying to put these in some sequence so that you can understand the importance of how they relate to each other. First, the Destino documents that were adopted by the TPB on May the 18th of this year. They're going through a process right now for a conformity determination. And the El Paso MPO has already addressed comments on the conformity document for FHWA and TCEQ. And we've also addressed comments from FHWA on our model, the Destino model. The TIP itself and the MTP comments have yet to come. Well, what I mean by that is there's going to still be comments, and it's going to be related to the fiscal constraint, and it's likely to look at projects and how they correlate with the model. That takes some time, and time is something that we're running out of. Okay. So this is related to where we're at with a 1-year grace period right now. We're not in a conformity lapse, but we're in a grace period, which means we're moving towards a full-blown conformity lapse. Okay? The way we get out of that grace period and avoid that is that we get the Destino documents approved for conformity. Okay? So Federal Highway is on the hook to do this for us in a time frame that is supposed to be within a 90-day time frame. We're already moving into well into the 4th month. Okay, so the Destino document, the TIP itself, is submitted already in June of this year to the STIP, contingent on approval of the conformity. We're about to get the STIP approved at the end of this month. And if we don't have conformity, our TIP will not go into the STIP. We cannot make any amendments because we're in a grace period. The way we get out of this is that we get the approval, the conformity determination on the Destino documents. So now we're talking about project calls. The next item, New Mexico TAP funds have been made available for 20 through 22. This is already open and closed, and we've had an ad hoc committee review projects, and the TPAC will be looking at the ad hoc committee's recommendations in October to bring that back to the policy board to get approval from the policy board. But we have to be able to amend the TIP to get them in there. And if we can't get out of our problem with the TIP and get the conformity, we're not going to be able to make any amendments to the TIP. New Mexico has also opened up a call for congestion mitigation and air quality non-mandatory. It's a little bit different than a regular CMAQ program, but it has a little bit less stringent rules, I guess I could say. The announcement for the project was made on the 17th of this month, and the project call information is available. You can find that on our website, and the call closes on October the 19th. The MPO is a designated recipient for the FTA 5310. That's the elderly to enhance mobility for seniors and individuals with disabilities. We're having a call for projects for 19 and 20. The announcement will be published on in the El Paso Times, the El Paso IMAS, and the El Paso website on October the 21st. And all proposal information will be posted online to include timelines. The call closes on December the 7th. These are directly related to our ability to amend the Destino documents. Going into the third, I'm sorry. Yes, sir.
Kind of a technical question on the CMAQ. Does New Mexico DOT hold some of the CMAQ funds for DOT projects, or does it all go out to the districts? I'm just curious, because we do it a little different.
Mr. Chair, Representative, so there is some funding that we utilize as a district and as a department. If I understand correctly, this one very specifically is open to all applicants, which would include DOT. So we would have to apply for this funding
Yourselves.
category specifically. But there is some mandatory that we are spending at the district level. In the past, what we've done specifically in our district, because of the projects that we've had in this MPO area, we haven't been able to spend it. So those are some of the other CMAQ open call for projects that we've done in the past. That was the mandatory. So it just kind of depends, but this one specifically, I believe that it is open for all applicants to include the department.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry.
Okay. And the third item is the Doña Ana County non-attainment under the new 2015 ozone standard. I don't think you have it here in your packet, but it was provided to you online. This was mentioned too by Federal Highway at the last meeting. As of August of 2019, if we do not have conformity on the portion in Doña Ana County near Sunland Park, we will go into a conformity lapse. That's worse than where we're at right now. And we will not be able to bring any federal funds into the region. So the El Paso MPO and the New Mexico Department of Transportation and New Mexico Environmental Department, along with FHWA, are in coordination on developing what the requirements are and what the process is. And why it's so difficult is because we don't have a budget, and we need to define exactly in our modeling what the boundaries are. So that it has to be run through our model, and we have to develop a conformity documentation, just like we would if we were developing a new MTP. This doesn't necessarily mean anything about projects, but we have to develop a new conformity. So what we're trying to figure out with our partners right now is what type of test do we have to do, because we don't have a budget. And we're working, we'll be working with the group in New Mexico, having another meeting next week, and then following that, we'll bring in the consultative partners, which is the whole group that we always work with, to include the Texas side, Environmental Protection Agency, TCEQ, New Mexico Environmental, all of those folks, and we'll get recommendations for them on how to move forward. We got 11 months, but really we only have about 5, probably, because the process that it takes, the time it takes to get the conformity determination never turns out to be as streamlined as we would like it to be. So we need to, we have to move as quickly as possible, get a conformity document back to this board after we do all the requirements to include public involvement, and then bring that back to the federal partners and get the conformity approval by August of next year. Okay, so this one, the next one, the congestion management process, the federal partners mentioned at the last policy board that we are not compliant on our CMP. So we're working alongside with some of our partners and also with the Texas Transportation Institute in responding to that. And we've spent a good part of this last week on how we're going to respond to that. Before we get a comment from Federal Highway, we're already moving forward to demonstrate how we actually did do not full-blown CMP. We realize that there's issues, and we'll have TTI out here. You guys have your training hours coming up over the next 120 days. And next month, before the policy board, TTI will be here to explain to you what a CMP is and to take you through that process. And you'll be able to gather training hours for that. But basically, the congestion management is the application of strategies to improve transportation system performance and reliability by reducing the adverse impacts of congestion on the movement of people and goods. And I won't read through this whole thing, but what it really boils down to is you have to look for strategies. We know that we're going to have a lot of projects that are going to be roadway projects. We understand that. But we have to look at multimodal strategies. And when we're looking at projects, a list of projects, and this ties back to the whole project selection process, if you will, too. But what it does is we have to look at other strategies. And is there a way to do something besides adding roadway capacity? That's to include active transportation, demand management, transit, those other things. And through a truly data-driven process, we'll be able to evaluate that, and we'll be able to come back and make some different recommendations. This is a federally required document. You have got to have it. The thing about the CMP is it's dynamic. It keeps feeding back into itself, and you're able to measure the performance. So FHWA's preliminary report to us was that we are not meeting the federal requirements. And as I said, TTI and the El Paso are working together to assess what the necessary development for a new CMP, and not only that, but to respond to what we found, or what Federal Highway found in our federal certification review. So with that said, I'll go ahead and wrap it up there unless anybody has any questions, and then turn it over to Mayela.
Representative Ortega.
Okay. I think all of the previous discussion regarding what projects we select and everything else has to be secondary to just what he presented. There are 3 areas there where we are in critical danger of going into nonconformance. So in my view, our most critical issue before us are those 3 issues. And what can this board do, what sort of resources can we provide to the MPO to avoid, which is basically a death sentence to an MPO to go into nonconformance?
That's right.
And we have 3 of them. We're facing 3 of them at the same time. I don't know that the board understands how critical this part is to the function of our MPO. We're worried about projects that if we don't fix this first, are not going to happen. It won't matter how we rank them, because we will be in nonconformance. This is so much more important to get this part right. So my question to the MPO is, what do we need to do as a board to make sure that this doesn't happen?
Well, I think one of our big issues right now, and as it relates to the Destino documents, we have got to get the Destino documents approved. And I can, keep doing what I'm doing, and the same comment has come to me before, well, what do you have to do to get Federal Highway to move within the 90-day time frame? Last time it took 11 months. That was actually probably the time before last with the Horizon 2040, I think. 8 months with a Destino. Maybe I'm getting them crossed. But, we're working diligently. I mean, I cannot tell you how much work is going into this. And, I don't have control over that, and I don't know what to tell you, but I can tell you this, that if we don't hurry up and get the comments and get them addressed, we're going to have a STIP, and our TIP is not going to be in there. And then we're going to come up on a November revision, and we're not going to be able to respond to it.
And in response to that, that's just the first one.
That's, yes, and
then we're looking
the
at
other one.
the Donna Ana nonconformance issue.
That's right.
That's right behind it.
That's right. And this one, I mean, you think 11 months, it's a lot of time? Well, it took 8 months and 11 months just to get it, once we got it to Federal Highway, to get the approvals. And we're still working on the fact that we don't have a budget and the process and the tests that have to be done to get the conformity over there. So I would sure hate to be delivering that news in August that we have run into a conformity lapse. We're working, and I will say this, it's moving along fairly well. The issue is how do we develop that test? We have to go, we don't have a budget, so we have to come back to do things internally, and we have to run models into model, and we have to demonstrate that we're able to do something based on what we're able to build versus a no-build scenario. And that's going to be a tough one too. But the short of it is that we're moving as fast as we can, but it's going to take the extra effort.
Okay, so in answer to that, apparently the MPO is doing what they're supposed to be doing. Should not we be looking at a different strategy instead of continue to plan for new projects and such? Perhaps we should switch our strategy to understand how to manage in nonconformance, because that's what we are going to be in 11 months. And all of the planning we could do doesn't matter until we reach conformity. So we're putting our emphasis in the wrong place. We need to get the MPO in conformance before we can do anything. And that's what we need to be worried about.
I mean, my question is, number one, how did we get here? Why are we at this stage, critical stage? And number two, what do we need to do? I mean, emergency meetings, one after the other, expedite decisions on some of these measures? I mean, what do we need to do, Roger, in order to avoid the death sentence that the mayor's talking about?
How we got here is that the Horizon 2040 MTP, the past plan, expired. There's a 4-year time frame, and it expired on June the 6th. We went into a 1-year grace period. So if everything moves the way it's supposed to, and we are able, we submitted prior to that the Destino documents before this board, and got them adopted and submitted them to Federal Highway. So if everything moved along quickly enough, we see that we'll be okay by the time the tip gets into the STIP. But now I'm starting to get very concerned about that. And usually it's November, the end of November, before, even though it's supposed to be fiscal year, October 1, by the time we get a new approval on the STIP. I was notified by the STIP group in Texas that we're actually on time this year. So October 1 is potentially when we're going to have a new tip, and October the 23rd is the First Amendment that we have to submit. So we're about a month away. The process is the process. There's only so much I can do with Federal Highway, because Federal Highway doesn't necessarily work on our same schedule. When we come back over to the non-attainment for the Doña Ana County, I'm working right now to see if there's a potential way that we run our conformity in Texas, and we'll be able to also include the New Mexico side. Because if we're not able to do that, we're going to have another problem. And I'll find out more about that pretty soon. So on the conformity side over there for the new non-attainment area in Sunland Park, it's convoluted by the fact that the El Paso MPO is not the only MPO that uses the same group. We're also, because there's some issues in Beaumont where they have to go back and demonstrate, even though they're not in non-attainment anymore. San Antonio is going to have to demonstrate because they are going into non-attainment. They're ahead of us probably. We all have to get in line. We're all using the same group. And I don't know if NCT COG in Houston. So if we don't hurry up and get in line with the consultative partners, and again, I don't control their schedule, but we're not going to be able to make this happen. So I'll be over in San Antonio Monday and Tuesday next week, and I'll be talking to my federal partners over there. So talking to our federal partners and trying to, and I stood right there at that podium at the FCR and told them, this is the most important thing on our plate right now. These things right here where we're having to demonstrate conformity. And we need to move through this as quickly as we can and get it done. But I have no control over that process, not really.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You said that we're already a month into it. So when did we find out that we had a question with regard to whether we were in conformity or not? Or was that over a month ago?
It was June the 6th, and what happened is that in 2014, on June the 5th, we had the Horizon MTP approved. So the clock ticked out. You only have 4 years. We were developing a conformity for the Horizon MTP, the MPO was, and at the same time, we're developing a Destino 2045 MTP. So we're working with the consultative partners, along with all of our local partners, and we're basically, essentially, we're developing 2 conformities at one time. So the Destino, for all practical purposes, got off to a late start for multiple reasons.
Why?
Well, I can go back to the procurement process for one. I could say that it took longer than we thought. The fact of the matter is, and if I have anything to say about it, it won't happen next time. We got off to a late start, and that goes back to some things like the CMP. And if you don't have a CMP and a project selection process that can rank projects, then you're going to have a problem. So the next plan, when we get the Destino approved, you got 4 years. But you better be looking at about 3 years from there, meaning we got to develop a CMP and a project selection process that can actually rank projects and a lot of other things so that we don't get off to a late start with the next plan. And hopefully we're not doing amendments at the same time when we're developing a new plan to the Destino. Long story short is that by the time we got to where we wanted to be with the Destino, the clock ticked out on the Horizon. We had already submitted, you had already adopted, but now it's in the hands of the federal process. And the federal process is taking longer than we wanted it to. And now it's running into our ability. One, we got the grace period. We got to get out of the grace period. We'll get out of the grace period in time, but my concern goes back more to the fact that we cannot amend our documents as long as we're in this grace period. So we need to get the conformity.
Well, I mean, I've got to agree with Mayor Miller. This was something that you were all alerted to in June. Why weren't we told about this? And so why is it that we already 1 month into it, you say we have a grace period of 60 more days. Are you guaranteeing us that this approval within the next 30 days is going to occur?
No, the grace period is for a year. It's a 1 year grace period.
On the first item, I thought there was several issues.
The grace period is that we have to get out of that grace period because our MTP expired. We have to develop a new MTP. The issue, though, coming back to the fact that we have already submitted our STIP, that is the companion to that new plan, it has to be approved
within 30 days.
Within the next few days into the STIP. And the condition on that was that it was contingent on the conformity determination.
And so is that going to happen? Are you going to be able to say that's
We're doing
gonna
everything
take
we
place?
can.
So that you can't really tell us?
I can't control the federal partners.
So if we do not come back into conformity, what does that mean? None of our projects
What it means,
are going to get funded?
and I mean, I already have a list of projects that I know need to be amended. If you cannot, even though we got projects right now that we can move forward with, because as long as we don't have the Destino, we can continue to operate out of the Horizon, which means we've got 19 and 20 covered in, for all practical purposes, in our TIP, even though we don't get a new TIP into the STIP. The problem is, for example, if TxDOT comes back and says, I need to amend a project so that I can move that project forward, whether it's for funding or for developmental processes or whether it's New Mexico or anybody else, they cannot amend it. So then it starts delaying project delivery. And if you continue to delay project delivery, and I'll throw another one at you, the 2020 network is upon us. And we've got projects that have a very short period of time to be done. And if they slip beyond 2020, we'll have to go back and do another conformity.
I agree.
So I think Mayor
This
Miller
is-
has caught
should
on
be
to,
priority.
this is, and that's what I want to try to make sure that I'm delivering here, the importance of where we're at right now.
What do we need to do? Yeah.
And I don't know if there's external lobbying that this board can do. From what the MPO is telling us, this is pretty much in the hands of the federal partners now to move
No,
this
it's nothing to
along.
do with funds.
That's where we are. But we are really facing not one,
serious.
but three serious issues, or we're shut down, basically.
And when I say budget, I just want to make sure you guys understand, I'm sorry, it's an emissions budget. My apology. It's nothing to do with funding, it's emissions. So in Doña Ana County, we don't know how to treat the ozone problem because we don't have an emissions budget. We're working on that.
And so how do you propose to get the budget in terms of the second item that you discussed? You said you need a budget. At this point, you don't have a budget.
There's
How-
two ways. You do one, what's called a less than baseline test, but that means we'd have to go back and revalidate our model, and that'll take a year.
Oh, my God.
Or two, you do a build, no build scenario, and you have to demonstrate through your build scenario that you're able to come in under the budget of the no build scenario.
How long does that take?
That doesn't take too long. Our challenge is in that ozone area over there since our base year in 2012 is there hasn't been a lot of projects in New Mexico. And until we get that and through that process, we're not going to know for sure. Okay.
And Roger, is there, the added capacity projects are the ones that really throw that off? Is there a lot of added capacity projects coming up?
We're able to demonstrate with all of our added capacity projects regionally that we can pass conformity. We're going through that process right now. We brought that document before you on May the 18th and it was conforming. Then this other area over here, due to the new standards in Doña Ana County, we'll have to still demonstrate conformity, but it's going to be looking specifically at that area over there, okay? So what kind of things have we done, whether they're strategies or whether they're projects? And there have been a few projects over there within this time frame. So the capacity projects certainly have an impact on whether or not you can pass the conformity. And it could be in a negative way or it could be in a positive way. But what we want to be able to show in the end is that whatever we're doing is that the air quality, that budget that we don't have, and the one that we create for ourselves, through our build, no build scenario, we're able to demonstrate that we're better with what we're building than if we didn't do anything.
And we're not at a disadvantage for the added capacity projects that are under construction, like Border Highway West and Go 10. They're under construction. That won't have a negative effect on.
No, we've already demonstrated we can pass regional
Modeling on it.
conformity.
Judge Vogt.
I mean, should this board submit a letter to our federal partners? Do they understand the severity that we're facing? I mean, do they care enough? I mean, is it our
That
fault
would
enough?
probably, I would say, yeah, that would probably.
Should it be one letter that we all sign on to? Should we all be sending individual letters on behalf of our agencies? I mean, I don't know what the most adequate way to.
I think to express yourself as a policy board, your concern wouldn't hurt.
Congresspeople and the state senator.
I mean, I'll recommend to Chairman Correa that, I mean, if, maybe we could have an ad hoc committee and certain members of the TPB that are really focused on looking at this, because it is a very serious issue. And I think it needs constant engagement, so that way we don't have to engage the full TPB, in frequent meetings. We can just perhaps have an ad hoc meeting of a few select members to address what's needed and then relay back to TPB if letters needed or anything like that.
Mr. Chairman, I think that's a great idea. It needs to be set up quickly because this is very serious from everything that I'm hearing. And so we, as a policy board, we need to assist the MPO and do whatever we can to help them move along. And we need to maybe get assistance from outside of the MPO, maybe our congressman, and we need to, be speaking with our federal partner.
Are there any members who are interested in volunteering if an ad hoc committee were this?
Okay, I am.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mr.
I would
Miller?
suggest that in the interim, that we direct staff to come up with an action plan
that incorporates a lot of the things that y'all have talked about, that I don't think we should wait. I mean, I think that the committee is a great idea, but I don't know why the things that have been brought up by certain members can't be done in conjunction with leading up to a meeting. I don't think, time is of the essence, so I don't know why we wouldn't be able to vote now or direct now to say, go get an action plan, send us that action plan, and these letters that are suggested, we could be signing off on them between now and the time that the committee meets.
Yeah, you mean individual agencies? Submitting
Well, what
letters?
I'm saying is that if staff could come up with an action plan that gets us to compliance,
Yeah.
to conformity, because they know, they should know.
Right.
And then we can sign off on letters as individual agencies, as you put it, if that is going to be the course of action we want to take. But I don't think we should wait till we have a meeting. I think that we should direct staff now to come up with that action plan so that we can start doing something as simple as signing off on a letter. But I'm sure there's other actions that could take place between now and whenever the committee meets.
Yeah. I mean, we're not posted for, it's just a report, but, I mean, Roger, if you could get together, an action item, a plan of actions to provide for the agencies and see what else can board members do to assist you? What can the individual agencies do to assist in this process? In the interim, I mean, and the benefit to having an ad hoc committee is that Chairman Perea can appoint them rather quickly and they can meet. And they don't have the same posting requirements that we do, so.
An action plan, I mean, what I would lay out is, I'm open for any suggestions that you guys have, but I can tell you how diligently we're moving forward with this, but, it's a matter of communication. It boils down to and that's what I'm going to do. I'm hoping to have the opportunity next week when I'm over there, is getting a face-to-face and talking about this with Federal Highway. And really what the action, we respond to Federal Highway in a week, probably, when we get comments. So, I mean, we do that as quickly as we possibly can. And I realize that, it takes time. Some of these things are very technical, and it takes time for that review and a response back. Mr. Medina sat here before this policy board a while back and said that there needed to be something in place that 90-day review period time, and it's not, it's Federal Highway's time frame that they give us, but how does that, how do you make that happen? What is it that we can do to say, assure that we get that done within that time frame? That's what's out of our control. I have no control over that period of time. If it was up to us, I mean, we can respond to those issues and be done within easily that time frame.
As an example, if we had an action plan, or if we want to create one as a board, I mean, like, the city and the county could partner, and we could bring on someone to help us with this process very quickly. If we brought on a consultant, or if we just worked on it as a staff together, I just think there's some things we can take into consideration. And as we were talking already, I mean, just to get on a plane and get out there to the FHWA, there's a lot of things that could happen. I mean, I don't know that it's that difficult to process. We just need to know who we need to talk to. Who do we need to get in front of, or who do we need to get y'all in front of, the elected officials? And I don't think that that action plan would be too hard to put together. Then we need to put that together, like by next week, and then we can just start acting upon it and start enacting the plan.
I mean, I'm open to suggestions, but when it comes to the conformity process, I assure you, the El Paso MPO is well adapted to how that works and able to complete that process. It's not the expertise. It's not like the expertise is not here.
And I wasn't suggesting that. I mean, if they can be handled, then I'm fine. We don't need to be involved. But if we need to enact a plan, I know as a resource, we're happy to get involved and do whatever we can to help the board.
Yeah, I mean, I think you sense the urgency from each of the members, and
I wanted to make sure that I get that point across to you guys, because come next STIP revision and, well, how come we're not able to get our projects in there? I want you to understand and we have been communicating this over the past few months. It's coming to that point, though, now where it's becoming urgent.
Senator Rodriguez and then Ms. Mombrani.
Who first?
Go ahead.
Oh, I think Mr. Gonzalez's suggestion is a good idea that ought to be carried forward. And I also think, based on your own thoughts about a letter of support signed by the MPO, maybe that's something Roger could
I
draft
really
for
think
us.
I really think that that's what we need right there.
Well, I was going to request that you draft, or for the board to consider asking you to draft a letter for our signature containing the requisite information that needs to be
Yes,
in
sir.
there as
Yes, sir.
part of the first step in this
Yes,
action
sir.
plan that Mr. Gonzalez is referring to. In other words, I think what we want is there's to be concrete steps, 1, 2, 3, this is what we're going to do, so that in hindsight down the line, we can
Yeah.
say, we did everything we could have done.
Yeah,
As
and the
opposed
steps.
to, we forgot something.
The steps are really what I laid out here in the first item. It's a process. There's 3 documents. You got your long-range plan, you got your short-range program, and they both have to be conforming. And to get that conformity, it takes the consultative partners to all come to an agreement on what you've done with those documents. So this is a process that's actually been going on for almost 2 years now with the development of those documents to include the conformity. And we have a lot of expertise outside of the MPO that give us guidance on how to do that. But once we get to this point right here, it's a matter of how do we address the issues that the federal partners found with our documents? And that's where we're at right now. We've already addressed the conformity, we've addressed the model. We're waiting on the MTP and the TIP. Once they give us those comments, we'll be able to respond in a short period of time and to hear what you're asking is, what they're going to ask us is, give me clarification on your projects and on your fiscal constraint. That expertise is right here in the MPO. If you go out and you try to bring someone else in to do that, it's going to take a lot longer than it is for the MPO to get through that process.
So, Ms. Mombrani.
Sorry. And I agree with both City Manager Gonzalez and Representative, because I think what I don't quite understand, I think what we need from you, Roger, from the MPO, is very specifically, this is the issue, this is why we're not in nonconformance, and these are the steps that we need to take. And if part of that is in terms of getting the letter of support, but within that letter saying, look, these are the steps to date that we've done.
I'd be happy to do that.
Yeah, I think that you need to document that in terms to put that in, but I think it's very difficult for us as a
I
board to
understand.
say, okay, this is what we're going to do without knowing specifically what those items of what it is that's keeping us from
I
being in
understand.
nonconformance. So
I
I think if you provide that to us, then certainly we're all willing to
And
do
then my
that.
first effort
I
at that
mean,
is
whatever
this
it
report
needs to
right in front of
take,
you right
yeah.
now. And
So-
that's really kind of what you got right here. You know, I can make it more clear for you.
Yeah, I think it needs
you know.
to be, all we need is just like very specific bullet points. This is the issues, this is why we're not in nonconformance, or we're in danger of being in noncompliance, and these are the steps that we need to take, and this is what we've already taken, we as in the MPO staff.
Sure.
And then from there, then we can determine in terms of, do you need other resources? In terms of, I mean, because we're all willing to help in terms of whatever we need to do, but, you know, do we need the letter? I think it's just, it needs to be very clear to us in terms of why we're not in compliance or why we're in danger of being in noncompliance, and then the steps needed. That would be very helpful.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Where is FHWA? Are they on the call right now?
I'm not sure.
Is we're not sure. Are you on the call, feds? Doesn't sound like it. All right.
I would just ask smart people in TPAC that I would just suggest that
what that action plan would be for Roger to do, that we ask him to elicit the assistance of the TPAC, and they're the experts. They can go in and help Roger, and then identify what we need to do in an action plan that would be helpful and that would not get in the way of what they need to accomplish. Because we stand ready to do whatever we need to from the city side, and I know the county does as well. So we just need to know what we need to do, and we're happy to do it.
The next TPAC is October the 3rd, if, unless we need to get one sooner.
Well, I just think that the TPAC has a lot of good people
Sure.
on there,
You
and
bet.
that's kind of our expert
That's
arm
right.
of the board,
Yeah.
and I think they would make a lot of sense for you to
I
for
agree.
you to elicit their assistance,
Yeah.
and you, along with TPAC, work together to come up with this action
Okay.
plan, and then I know you're talking a lot about process, which is good. I'm glad you're very familiar with that, but you also pointed out that there's this sense of urgency, and we hear you. And what my suggestion is that the board consider asking you to elicit the support of the TPAC, work together as a unit, and then identify the different tasks that need to get done that the board could be helpful with. If there's things that we shouldn't get involved in, that's fine. We
Okay.
just need to know. And we've got experts too that could be in assistance that serve on that TPAC board.
Yes,
that
sir.
We're happy to do what we need to. What you're hearing from us
Yes,
is
sir.
we want to help to
Yes,
get
sir.
this process done, not get in the way, not say there's not experts at MPO. We hear that.
Yeah.
There's experts. We also have experts at TPAC that can work with the MPO, that are part of the MPO, that can then tell us what we need to do. And I think that's what you're hearing us say.
That's right. Okay.
Any questions, comments? We had one more item I think Mayala took over.
One more item is your training and absences. Again, that resets October 1st for everybody. So absences, the way that works, you're only allowed 2 absences. The third one, you'll lose your voting privileges. Again, and that is for the fiscal year of the MPO, which is October 1st through September, the end of September. Training, there was a continuous education policy that was adopted by this board, and the requirement is 5 hours, and that has to be completed within 120 days, the first 120 days, in order for you to have your voting privileges. The MPO does try and offer an hour before each meeting, which is October, November, December, and January. Outside of that, I know there are some members that attend conferences. It is your responsibility to submit to me the agenda, and then it'll get approved. It has to be transportation related, and then so that can be accredited to you as well. Also, there is a list that we send out through the online, and that's through the National Highway Institute to obtain a training hours, which I handed out a list and all members have, and it is on the screens as well. That is listing the time that you are carrying over for this fiscal year, whether it's an hour, half an hour. And then the ones in orange are the members that elected to take online courses. Now, those courses will not be credited if you resubmit them for this fiscal year. So I identified which courses you submitted for 17-18. We hand out an entire list. This is not all the list. These are not all the courses through NHI. These are just some of the ones that the members elected to take and submit. After completing the course, you are given a certificate. Again, it is your responsibility to submit that to me before the deadline of the first 120 days. Other than that, I think that was it. If there are questions on courses that you have taken and you want to be credited for, then you can submit that, and I will submit it to the director, and then we can submit it to the chair for approval. And that was all that we have on the training and absences.
I would just make a comment quickly on the absences. There's been some discussion, questions about excuses and such. There are no, under the bylaws, there are no provisions for excused absences. other than what's already in the law called legislative privilege, and that is for the legislators, the state legislators who are actually in attendance of a session of the legislature, and then they have a built-in excuse, and that's a privilege exerted by the legislature under the law. So let's go ahead. Yes.
I have a question on that. What if you have jury duty?
You know,
Yeah, oh, yeah.
my
'Cause
my
that-
thought is
that-
this. I think that the state law is going to trump what the bylaws are, just right off the top of my head.
Okay.
And I would say that if you have jury duty on a day that it's a board meeting, if you get that into Mayella
Okay.
in a timely fashion, I think that that would probably be an excuse. There are some things that are not written in our bylaws about this that as a policy I've looked at and made a few command decisions on, such as when one board member from a government entity leaves and another person from that government entity comes on board. It's been historically done this way, but if, say, like the person is the mayor of certain city and a new mayor is elected, and so the new mayor comes in, the old mayor is no longer in office, we do not count the absences of the old mayor against the new mayor. But where, say, there's a new designation, a new designee from the same city, the person who leaves is still on that city council or working in that same capacity, and they replace someone else, then the absences of that former person do count, because it would try to keep from doing by indirection what they can't do directly, you see. But at the same time, some new person comes on, you don't want to penalize them with something that may be built in, possibly in the form of a little sabotage or something, or ill will. And we don't want that to take place on this board.
Look, I think we really need to consider amending the bylaws on this issue. You just gave some examples of something that sounds reasonable that we ought to take into account. You mentioned the legislative privilege. We're doing a lot of interim committee hearings this session.
Yes.
And that's not during session, but it's still
Well-
legislative. And then 2 of my 3 absences are related to rotator cuff surgery. And we don't take into account, serious illnesses or anything like that. Seems to me that's unreasonable. I've never heard of that. And so I think we got to look at the bylaw provision and come up with ideas or suggestions about what might be a reasonable excuse and incorporate those, by amending the bylaws.
And there's a discussion that I have been working on, and the ad hoc committee that met with Ms. Ortega as the chairperson of that, we talked about a lot of things and decided, well, what is in the scope of what the committee was going to do, but there were also other discussions like that. And I have a list of things and things prepared. I was going to speak with the chair on this to get before the board as recommendations of some changes, and that is one of them.
Okay, good.
Yeah, that was something that was brought up to our attention while we were meeting by one of the members, actually the mayor. And we told him that that was something that we thought needed to be looked at, but it wasn't within the scope of what we were supposed to be doing with that ad hoc committee. But I think that there are changes that obviously need to be made to the bylaws.
Because we used to vote on those every month. It was in the bylaws.
There was, yes, and then that was
And
changed.
it used to say rotator cuff, but only right.
But I've done it on both now, so I'm covered, Joe.
So you get half of it.
No, only half. Well,
Any other questions or comments? Is there a motion? Thank you to staff is there a motion to adjourn? Is there a motion to adjourn? I don't hear a second.
Second.
There's a second. All in favor? Meeting is adjourned. The next meeting of the TPB is scheduled for 9 a.m. October 19th.